My name is Jason Leahy, Executive Director of the Illinois Principals Association. Thank you for joining me for this IPA talk. Great for the opportunity to speak with Dr. Carmen Ayala, our Illinois State Superintendent of Schools. Carmen, thank you for taking a couple minutes out of your busy schedule to talk with me and just share some different things going on at the state board. Today's date is March 3rd, and while it's a little cooler than it was yesterday, it feels like spring might finally be starting to sprung here for us just a little bit. But thanks for joining.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Jason, for inviting me to speak with you today. I just want to say a big, huge thank you to all the principals across the state for their incredible work that you do in the schools, for your students, for your communities. And Jason, I'd really like the message that you sent out a few weeks ago, that we are right where we're meant to be, that even in the midst of all this chaos, sometimes we make a difference as leaders in this moment, right where we are. So before we jump into some hot topics that we have for today, I wanted to give a shout out to two principals who are making a difference for the mental health of their students and teachers. Both of these principals have been participating in our Resilience Education to Advance Community Healing, or REACH program. Amy Blomberg is the principal of Broadmeadow Elementary School in Rantoul, and she has the goal of creating a trauma-responsive school. She's assembled her REACH team, and they've completed their needs assessment, they've created goals, and they're going to share their trauma-responsive plan with their school community and stakeholders to gather some feedback this spring, then implement next year. Amy has committed deeply to the work, and I'm so excited to see her school continue on this journey. Principal Catherine Martin at Charles Sumner Math and Science Academy in Chicago Public Schools is a little farther along in the process. Catherine has implemented the Calm Classroom model and has instituted accountability partners for staff to check in on each other's goals for self-care. Teachers start out every morning and afternoon with a short mindfulness activity like meditation or scripted breathing. These dedicated moments help students settle into the space so that they can be ready for learning. Teachers are much more able to recognize the signs and symptoms of trauma, and students are more communicative to see teachers as partners to help them resolve conflicts. All of the principals participating in the REACH program are taking this opportunity of the pandemic to institute lasting systemic change to their school cultures to benefit students and educators for many years to come. And so I'm very proud and grateful to have leaders like these in our schools to meet the challenges of this historic moment. I probably need to take some of those breathing meditation moments myself.
There's no doubt. Well, I've got another 16-year-old in my house now that just started. He drove himself to school for the first time today. So I guarantee you my wife and I could use to do some of the breathing. But I got to tell you, I'm impressed with the fact that you've got teachers that are working to hold each other appropriately accountable to making sure that they're getting those things done, not only for their kids, but maybe more importantly in this situation for themselves as well. That's really taking things to another level. So I appreciate that. And I'll use, since you brought this up in terms of mindfulness, I'll also use this as a moment to continue to remind members about IPA's member assistance program. For those that might need just a little boost, us providing counseling support and a whole host of other life supports there that are available as well. So be sure to check those out on the website. So Dr. Ayala, this was a big week, with the lifting rather of the mask mandate. And I'm definitely not going to editorialize one way or the other with regards to that, but would be remiss if I didn't just ask if you had any brief thoughts on it before we got into some other things.
Well, as we all know, the CDC issued its guidance last Friday to recommend masking in schools only in areas of high transmission based on a new set of key metrics. And so the governor lifted the school mask mandate effective Monday, February 28th. I'm hopeful that the lifting of the indoor mask requirement this week signals that we're approaching the end of this pandemic. Of course, we have to be prepared for new variants and for the trend in the data to reverse, but at the moment, I'm celebrating inside. School districts and local municipalities always have the ability to go further than the state requirements, and they can continue to require masks at the local level. But we're encouraging school districts to follow the CDC guidance appropriate for the transmission level in their county. Our agency is working with the Illinois Department of Public Health to update guidance documents, and we will definitely alert you as soon as they are posted.
Appreciate that, and that's good advice for sure. So we're just going to go ahead and move on from that. So you and I, just as we were starting the recording here, I was sharing how myself, along with members of the IPA board, and in fact, I piped into an ISB board committee meeting from DC this week. We were out there and advocating on the Hill, and we were fortunate to hear from Secretary Cardona as part of our trip. And one of the things that he talked about during our time out there was just about the importance of making sure that we spend the dollars that are coming from all the ESSER funds, spending them, reasonably and responsibly, and also making sure that we spend them all, because he talked about, and I believe this to be true, I think he's right, that these dollars, really the way that schools choose to use them moving forward, could own for federal funding and policy related to funding, maybe moving forward for the next decade or so, just because people have a mindset of that. So things that came to mind for me were, making sure that we follow that advice, to probably telling the story about how these dollars are being used and the impact that they're having with federal policymakers. We'll sure want to continue to encourage that. But it was kind of serendipitous or coincidental, rather, that your weekly email this week spoke to that, and making sure that everybody was getting their applications in for this current round of funding. So I thought, while I had you here, I just let you speak to that for a moment, if you wouldn't mind.
Yes, thank you, Jason. I think we're hearing much of the same thing from what you heard while you were in Washington, D.C. And this is why the agency has done some sessions on braiding and blending, and how we can braid and blend federal funds and other funding resources to potentially continue with some of the initiatives that are being put in place using some of the federal funding we have now. The good news is that most of our districts have taken advantage of the emergency funds that are being provided, and they're doing amazing things with the funds in terms of providing interventions and additional supports for our students. But we do have a little less than 300 of our students that have yet to apply. And so we want to make sure that all of our districts are applying and really taking advantage of the funding. The last thing we want is for applications to come in kind of at the tail end, and then you're in a rush to try to spend the funds. And that's where, we may run into some challenges and difficulties. But yes, we do need to be careful with how we utilize these funds, and thinking of how do we maximize them, and how do we really utilize future funds to continue some of the good work that's coming out of this unfortunate pandemic that we have been under.
Well, we sure don't want to give the impression that we don't need the money, right? So exactly. We've got to get those applications in and make sure that that's being done for sure. So appreciate your thoughts with that. As we're talking about money here, to transition from federal dollars, of course, we've got a state budget that's been proposed. We've seen, the governor issue his proposal that's now moving to the General Assembly. And just kind of curious about your thoughts about what's moving and what the agency's priorities are here as we move into the budgeting process this year.
Well, one of the things we know about our governor in Illinois is that he's made the state's children and families his top priority since taking office. And since fiscal year 2020, the governor has ensured nearly $1.1 billion in new funding for the state's evidence-based funding formula, and more than $104 million for early childhood education. These priorities and investments have brought real change to our schools. More teachers, better pay, more wraparound supports, and more early childhood programs. Our students and educators are facing the challenge of a lifetime teaching and learning as we emerge from this pandemic. And the budget proposal that the governor has provides the funding and stability that our schools need to continue to recover and thrive. You know, some of the highlights from the budget proposal include a $350.2 million increase for evidence-based funding, which will provide another $50 million round of funding for the property tax relief grants, and $300 million for the EBF tiers, and $200,000 to train current English learner teachers. $96 million increases proposed for mandated categoricals to fully fund orphanage tuition and increase the proration of special education private facility reimbursement to 91%. There's also an additional $54 million for the early childhood block grant to create spots for more than 7,000 additional children, and also to increase the quality of existing programs, and a $2 million increase for agricultural education to reflect the growth of these programs across the state.
Being a guy that used to wear the blue jacket in FFA, I sure appreciate those agricultural funds. And then also, I appreciate the agency support, and then also seeing in the governor's proposal support for the principal pipeline. And we know that federal dollars are also being used currently to support new principal mentoring, which is particularly critical to help keep people in those seats. So all of that is terrific news. And just the overall economic outlook with regards to the state's finances is outstanding. Another thing that you've spoken quite a bit about really since you began in your position, Dr. Ayala, and I know some things are starting to move right now, is dealing with the equity journey. So the equity continuum, and just kind of curious about your thoughts with that.
Well, equity is in the name of the tool, the equity journey continuum. So it's clear that equity is what it's all about. You know, I've seen throughout my career as a teacher, as an educational leader, as a district superintendent, that equity benefits all students, because equity and diversity are not just about race. Even in school districts that mostly serve school students from one ethnic background, there's still tremendous diversity. Each student has their own family dynamic, their own learning style, their own life goals, their own favorite subject. They may practice different religions or have different family income levels. They may have special needs, struggling with mental or physical health concerns, or experiencing challenges at home. So a mindset of equity says that our policies, programs, and practices might need to change in order to recognize and affirm this diversity so that all of these students can reach high expectations. And data is the foundation of equity work. It's our data that shows us what students are underserved and where we need to focus and make changes in order to improve outcomes for all. At the state level, our data shows us that over the past few decades, there are groups of students who have historically not been served well by our school system. The Equity Journey Continuum will help districts look at their own data through the lens of equity. The tool will shed a light on where a district is on its equity journey on a scale of 1 to 4 in 3 areas: student learning, learning conditions, and elevating educators. The Equity Journey Continuum is currently only at the district level and not at the school level. District leaders gained access to their data in the Data Review and Verification tool through My IIRC last week. For principals who would want access to the data in the DRVT tool, they should talk to their district superintendent about access. The Data Review and Verification tool shows districts the entire suite of data and all of the indicators that are being used. But only each district step along the continuum in those 3 broad areas will appear on the 2022 report card, along with the district's narrative if they choose to submit one. We're working very closely with Loyola University on a professional development series to help districts take action based on their data. And we held a webinar about the continuum this past Monday and received a lot of positive feedback and feedback that this tool can really be a lever to make positive changes for students across the state.
Encourage school leaders to make sure that they're checking in with their district office. And I would say one of the things that I'm grateful for too is that you're leveraging data that already is being collected by the state from districts, right? So that is very significant. that there aren't additional data collection requirements there. And I'm sure people are grateful for that. So one last thing that I know that you and the ISB team have been pretty busy with here, and I know it's something that you're particularly concerned about, is assessment. And so we've got a lot of work that's happening with that currently. I'm grateful that we've been able to have IPA members and school leaders be a part of that process and that work as well. So I know there's some study of this that's being done, and a lot of collection of thoughts from the field. So where are we at now as we consider what the future might look like for our state assessment system?
Well, Jason, as you know, I'm a former teacher, district administrator, and district superintendent. And coming into this role as the state superintendent, I knew that one of my goals would be to increase the usefulness of our state assessment. The current assessment is too long, it's too stressful for students, and it delivers results too late to be used in the classroom. My overall goals for an assessment redesign is 1, for students to spend less time on testing, 2, to make the assessments less stressful, 3, to give teachers and families timely, actionable results, and 4, to increase equity and access to high-quality assessments. The Illinois State Board of Education is working with a national nonprofit organization, the Center for Assessment, to help us conduct extensive stakeholder engagement. We've collected thousands of responses to a survey, and we're engaging the state committees dedicated to assessment and accountability, such as the State Assessment Review Committee, IBAM, the P20 Council, and we've hosted focus groups with organizations such as the Illinois Principals Association. ISB absolutely will not move forward with any changes to the state's assessment system without being guided by comprehensive and meaningful engagement with the field. Our one and only goal in exploring changes to the assessment is to be responsive to you and to better meet the needs of our educators, students, and families. We will take the feedback we've gathered and present a recommendation to the members of the state board, who will ultimately decide how we will move forward. One question we keep getting is, why can't we get rid of these standardized assessments altogether? Well, these accountability assessments are federally required, so we don't have the option to not give the assessment. Failure to administer these assessments would put Illinois at risk of losing up to nearly $1 billion in federal funding every year. Another question we've gotten is, why now? Why are we taking on this project right now when schools have so much on their plate? Well, the answer here is funding. We can utilize a portion of the federal pandemic relief funding to improve our state assessment. And as you know, these funds have an expiration date. So we've got to make changes now or potentially be stuck with the assessment we've had for many years to come. In addition to getting general feedback on state assessment, we're also getting feedback on the specific idea of through-year assessments. Our stakeholder engagement so far has pointed to through-year assessments as an option that would meet many of our goals. Through-year assessments are much shorter assessments given a few times during the school year. Or use of the data at the state level would not change. We would still use a single summative score as part of accountability and federally required reporting. However, at the local level, a through-year assessment would provide more instructionally useful information much more quickly and would allow educators to see a student's growth during the school year. Since more than half of our districts spend their own local funds on through-year assessments, the state providing these for free would allow those local funds to meet other local needs. And each assessment would be much shorter, making the testing experience less stressful and allowing more time for instruction. The bottom line here is that we have to give a state assessment. So we'd like to make that state assessment the most useful it can be for our educators and the most meaningful it could be for our students and families.
A few kids at home, they're all about shorter tests. I can guarantee you that for sure.
Absolutely.
We will stay fully engaged here and grateful for the opportunity to do so as we see this moving forward. So not to put you too much on the spot, Dr. Ayala, but with springtime coming on here, what as the sun starts to shine, maybe what's the thing you're looking forward to most as we hopefully head towards warmer climates sooner than later? At least we can keep our fingers crossed.
Well, I think seeing our students outside in the playground, playing, engaging, I can't wait to get out to schools and walk through classrooms and see the smiling faces. That's the one thing that's been missed the most throughout this whole pandemic. The equity work, the equity journey continuum, rolling out, and a lot of the initiatives that are in place right now. I think we're beginning to really start to see the fruits of our labor with teacher pathway programs. We've got over 7,000 future teachers in teacher pathways across 88 high schools in Illinois. It's wonderful. It's amazing. So really beginning to see some things starting to move and pick up speed now that we are hopefully we'll be seeing the pandemic in our rearview mirror.
It'd be nice to be talking about regular education things for a while, right? I'm a little fatigued by the other, like everyone else. And of those 7,000, we probably have a job for every one of them today. Like we
absolutely
could right now for sure. Well, Dr. Ayala, thank you as always for the time. Sure appreciate that. Again, my name is Jason Leahy, Executive Director of the Illinois Principals Association, with our State Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Carmen Ayala. If there's anything IPA can do for you at any time, don't hesitate to give us a call or check us out on the web at www.ilprincipals.org. Take care.